80% of adults struggle with basic financial literacy, and yet most of us spend 16+ years in school. So why are so many educated people still broke? This question led Robert Kiyosaki to write one of the most controversial personal finance books ever published. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki contrasts two father figures. One, highly educated but financially stuck. The other, less educated but financially free. Rich Dad is a compilation of all the wise things his real dad told him. So even though he combined aspects of his actual parents into a single character, their individual traits still stand out. Real Dad pushed him to excel in school, earn a degree, get a good job, save money, and retire with a pension. Fake Dad said this will keep you stuck in the middle class. Getting rich is different from investing. So let me put this in perspective. Sometimes a little context wouldn't hurt. Kiyosaki says the rich buy assets and the poor buy liabilities. That's a great rule of thumb. But what's the difference between the two? Well, assets are things that put money in your pocket, like stocks, bonds, real estate, or businesses. Here's the thing. Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's still a work of genius. After all, he sold over 40 million copies. However, if advice is built on a fictional foundation, how much of it should we actually follow? It makes you wonder, are we learning personal finance or just consuming motivational fiction? Liabilities take money out of your pocket, like houses that you live in, cars that you drive, clothes that you wear, and food that you eat. It's a collection of lessons that might not apply to you. Just because something worked for Robert doesn't mean it'll work for you. His backstory is unique and his journey is extraordinary. While the title suggests a dichotomy between rich and poor, the reality is more nuanced. Most people aren't poor and most people aren't rich. We're somewhere in the mushy middle. And our goal shouldn't be to escape the middle class. It should be to thrive in it. If you're poor, you can't buy assets. It takes money, time, and knowledge. Meanwhile, liabilities are unavoidable, but here's where things get messy. A balanced diet of personal finance books would look like this. Start with Rich Dad, Poor Dad for inspiration, then read The Richest Man in Babylon for classic wisdom. Follow that up with the 4-Hour Workweek for actionable steps. And finish it off with Your Money or Your Life for a reality check. Personally, I'd skip the sequel. You need a place to live, a car to get to work, and clothes to wear. So that means you're stuck in the middle class. The only way out is to make more money. But here's the problem. Making more money means working more. And working more means spending less time with family, friends, and hobbies. As Robert says, you can't have it all. Imagine there are two groups of people. Group A thinks you should save your money. Group B thinks you should invest your money. Both groups are giving good advice, but they're addressing different goals. There is no one-size-fits-all. Group A cares about safety and security. Group B cares about growth and wealth building. Which one is right? Well, both. Instead, Rich Dad urged him to buy assets. Anything that puts money in your pocket, buy assets. To poor and middle class, buy liabilities they think are assets. Confront them head on. Sometimes we chase wealth because we're trying to avoid the pain in our relationships, our health, our work, or our community. Money becomes a distraction. It makes us lazy, greedy, or selfish. So here's what I suggest. Don't try to escape your problems. Then you can use your money to enjoy the solutions. That's freedom. Real Dad had plenty of assets himself, like his state job. Kiyosaki credits his wife, who's not mentioned in the book, for inspiring him to create cash flow statements, which helped him become a millionaire at 20. Yet when he wrote the book, he didn't mention her at all. Instead, he used his own children to illustrate how to calculate net worth. I mean, come on, Robert, be honest. For example, in 2022, average student loan debt hit $36,000. Rich Dad said the only way to truly be financially free is to have your money work for you. This book has sold over 40 million copies. But is it wisdom or oversimplified fiction? It made me question everything I'd learned from Real Dad. And I realized he was wrong about some things. Some of us don't even have side hustle energy. So what's the solution? And if you include auto loans and mortgages, the average American carries over $135,000 of debt. All these payments keep us tethered to our jobs. And as Robert says, that's exactly what the system wants. Well, the answer is a bit of both. It's actually not Robert's fault. But the problem is this. buying rental property requires capital, time, and risk. Not all businesses are scalable. And not everyone can turn their passion projects into income streams. Kiyosaki's famous quote is, "Don't work for money, work for time." And that's great advice except for those who can't afford to quit their jobs. They're raising kids or supporting aging parents. We need to pay rent. To explain, we have to talk about his background. The last 40 years, inflation has skyrocketed. But what's the alternative? Spend it all now and add to your debt. That's like pouring water into a crack in the sidewalk. You're better off investing your money. Which brings us to another valid point. If you want to beat inflation, you must invest. But here's the catch. Investing carries risks. Any financial advisor worth their salt will tell you that. Yet Robert writes as if investing is guaranteed to make you rich. Or my favorite, there's a sequel called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Return of the King. No, just no. Anyway, I'm going to give you the unfiltered truth about this book. So let me start with what I actually agree with. Robert was born in Hawaii in 1947 and grew up in a middle-class home. His biological father was a highly educated man who worked for the state government and had a PhD. That's the poor dad. Upon returning home, he started a multi-million-dollar business, but it failed, and he lost everything. Found himself broke and depressed. As he describes it, "I knew I wasn't going to kill myself, but I didn't want to live either. So I decided to kill the rat." Robert returned to work for his rich dad, eventually buying a second-hand copy of The Richest Man in Babylon and reading it straight through the night. From that moment on, he vowed to never be broke again. This inspired him to write Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He served in Vietnam. His rich dad was his best friend's father who owned several businesses. This includes a gas station, a car dealership, an appliance store, a TV repair shop, a restaurant, bars, a hotel, several homes, and a bank. Okay, maybe it's Robert's fault after all. By age 13, he was already working in his rich dad's business. By age 16, he drove a Porsche. At 17, he bought his first rental property. By 20, he owned multiple properties. At 23, he became a millionaire. But then life took a dark turn, and now I'm going to share with you the most shocking secret of all. When I read this book in college, I loved it, and that's because it planted a seed. On the other hand, I now see why fake dad wanted Robert to buy assets. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not the whole story. Kiyosaki also criticizes saving money due to inflation, saying it's like pouring water into a leaky bucket, and he's right. That's because Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't about investing. It's about getting rich. Now, as a lifelong learner, I understand the importance of teaching timeless principles and valuable lessons. That's why the biggest financial lesson I've learned is that money doesn't solve all problems. In fact, Rich Dad, Poor Dad gives us the perfect example of this. Anyway, he later admitted that Rich Dad was a composite of real people, which raises a critical question. How much of this book is fiction? Here's what I know for sure. The book provides food for thought, but it shouldn't be the main course. If you want to learn more about money, you'll love this video next. See you there.